and welcome back to another episode of the Practice Players Podcast. Thrilled to be joined by a fellow Buckeye here, former manager Kyle Davis. Unfortunately, Nick cannot be with us today. He had something come up last minute, but we still love you, Nick. It's all good. So just get started off. Won't take up too much time. Kyle Davis, or KD as we call him around here, if you sort of just want to explain your journey to how you got to the position that you are today.
Whew, a lot of dumb luck and good timing, to be honest with you. Former manager, knew I always wanted to work in college basketball, professional basketball in some way. So in high school, I kind of got started where when I realized like, hey, I'm not good enough to ever play at a level that I want to be at, I started to pick up coaching. I started my own AAU program that was focused on freshmen at the time because I was like, I'm not going to get any good, 11th or 12th graders that are going to play. So I started with freshmen. Ended up sort of having a pretty good team, met a couple Ohio State coaches out on the road and just said like, how do I get in the business? And they said like, come to Ohio State. We'll, find some opportunity for you. And I was like, this is awesome. Like I'm going to be like a student coach or whatever that is. And I never forget, I showed up and they never said manager. So I kind of showed up and they're like, all right, you're going to be a manager. Like, what the heck does that even mean? So I basically was a manager. I'll never forget my first day. Bryce Crawford, who I think just went on to VCU, he's a senior manager for Ohio State at the time. He said, if you want to ever be anything in college basketball, you ever want to be anything within this program, like you got to do something else. You got to give more, do more. You can't just be a manager. And I was like, all right, I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get involved in the film room. And I got super involved in the film room as a manager. And I kind of got lucky because at the time we just brought in Greg Paulus. Greg Paulus was, he was actually just getting done. Well, I don't know if Greg Paulus was one of the first ever grad transfers. I don't know if you guys know this, where he played at Duke and then was a football player at Syracuse for a year. And then, tried to play in the NFL, tried out for the Saints, and then was an assistant coach for Navy for a year. And then Thad Matta hired him as a video coordinator. And Thad hired GP with no video experience at all. And Greg Paulus got to Ohio State, and he looked at me and a couple other managers in the film room and said, I have no idea what I'm doing from a technology standpoint. You guys figure it out, and I will promote you to the staff. Like, I'm going to tell everyone that, like, you're the ones doing it, and I'm going to get you into this business. And really, that's kind of how it worked out for me. I was super involved even as a manager. And then when I wanted to be a GA somewhere, they basically said, like, do it here, don't leave. We had a couple really good managers before me that had kind of stuck on. So I was a GA at Ohio State. I was kind of finishing my GA ship and like looking to figure out like what's next. Like, am I going to get a job somewhere as a video coordinator? Am I going to be able to leapfrog somewhere else? Do I need to like take a year out of the business and go work for a company like Huddle, like that's super involved in the video space? And I'll never forget, it's actually in the middle of the season. David Egelhoff, our ops guy, came in and tapped me on the shoulder when I was about to take another job and said, like, don't take that job, like we're going to hire you. And I was hired as recruiting and ops at the time, nice little entry level position. And then Jake Diebler left and he went to Vanderbilt. He was our video coordinator at the time, so I moved to video. I actually was a part of the staff as Thad sort of retired, and we brought in Coach Holtman and basically got fired. And I'll never forget, it happened in like the middle of June. And Holtman came in and he was really used to like a smaller family because Butler had a really tight knit staff. It was a smaller staff, and I really had no idea if I was going to be able to stay on. And it's in the middle of June, so like other jobs aren't coming up. Thankfully, I was able to just sort of stick around. I'll never forget, Robbie Rucky and I stayed up for like 2 straight nights. Ask Robbie; it's one of the craziest things we've ever done. We basically said like, how can we like help Holt, like, or just prove some value or do something? We stayed up for 2 straight nights in a row and put together this binder that was like everything to do with Ohio State basketball, every recruiting relationship, place around campus, things to do on campus tours, how we structured visits, like shit about our own players, like the know that this guy XYZ, like everything about his family relationships, and gave it to Holt. And I think that sort of at least helped Holt bridge the gap a little bit of understanding to get some people around that know how this place works. Ohio State's such a big machine. And he ended up keeping Robbie and I on. And I've been able to sort of grow in my role at Ohio State. I think one of the things that really, really helped me is like the growth of social media and the growth of player evaluations and the growth of just understanding how to technologically innovate, I guess, if you will, within basketball. And obviously I got really into the recruiting space, and Dave, you know, this is sort of my forte now, is just evaluating players and figuring out different ways to get the best guys into Ohio State as we possibly can get. And I was named a director of recruiting this past year, which is really just means a lot of back end work sort of behind the scenes. You know, it's always a struggle to explain to people that director of recruiting never leaves campus to go recruit. It's all done behind the scenes, but I view my role as figure it out, arm our staff to be able to, you know, help them recruit the best players possible with all the resources and assets from a creative standpoint. And honestly, most importantly, make sure we're recruiting the right guys. So it's kind of been a lot of dumb luck and timing, like I said, of just like being in the right place as new staffs have come in and I've been able to branch out my network, or having the right person leave at the right time to be able to, you know, fill in their shoes. I mean, when I was a GA, I'm getting long winded here, but we had Christopher Sparks, who was like our recruiting coordinator, and he took a new opportunity kind of outside of college basketball in like August. So I was going to my second year being a GA, and I just sort of like one day said like, well, I want to get in the recruiting space. I'm really good at the video, and I literally just sort of sat at his desk and started to do his job, and had no idea what I was doing for the first couple months, and then just said like, eventually, if I just become the guy that does his job, like, how are they not going to give me his job? And kind of worked out, to be honest with you.
No, that's actually awesome. I didn't even know the story about you and Rob with the binder either. That's my first time hearing that one.
So the funny thing about that too is, the whole timing of that whole situation was wild. Like I said, normally the job cycle happens in college basketball March into April. Gosh, I mean, like you'll get into May and nothing really happens, and that whole happened at the beginning of June. It was the same week of team camp, actually. So we were like gearing up for team camp, and it happened on a Monday morning. And I remember all just looking around at each other like, now what? Like, do we have team camp in a couple of days? Like, we're all basically fired. I mean, that's just how the business works. Like your head coach, you know, isn't the head coach anymore, and you got to find a new opportunity. It's very rare that you get to stick around. And you know, all our assistants basically knew right away that they weren't staying on. And Rob and I were kind of like young in the business too. We didn't have that super big network, and it's not like there was just jobs floating around. And obviously with a job like Ohio State, there's all going to be these rumors of like who's going to get the job. I remember we were going to dinner. We took our players to dinner that week just to try to like bring them all together. Like, hey, like I know this stinks right now. We all want to know what's going on, but like we're in this together. Like we'll figure it out. Like I don't know anything more than you, but you know, we went to like a really nice dinner. I think we went to Hyde Park. And we at dinner, the rumors were like Fred Hoiberg is going to be like the next coach of Ohio State. And then it was like, oh, Doug McDermott's actually going to be the coach. And here's this flight tracker of this plane that's going to go see like Doug McDermott. And I remember I called Rob and I left that dinner. I said, like, I'm going in the office. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to come up with something to try to stay here. Like, obviously, you know, I love Ohio State. I wanted to stay on staff. And Rob called and said, like, I'll come in too. And we were just sitting there thinking, like, what can we do? We said, like, what would help, you know, the new staff? And that's where we came up with this binder. And literally, we stayed up all night doing it. And then we had team camp the next day. So, like, at 9 a.m., all these teams came rolling through. And we basically didn't have a staff, didn't have a head coach. David Egloff, our ops guy, was on the mic at team camp. And one of the all-time greatest speeches, basically like, hey, campers, we're excited to have you here. We don't have a coach. We don't know who it's going to be, but like, it's going to be great. So like, have a great team camp. And it was, you know, you get through all of team camp. And then, you know, I team camp runs late too. Like we cleaned up and got everything wrapped up like 10 o'clock at night. And then I think Rob and I looked at each other like, well, we're not done working. So like, let's just keep working on this binder. And a lot of the managers that actually stayed to like help team camp, like kind of like helped us too. And it was honestly one of my favorite nights I've ever had, because it was like misery loves company to a degree. No one knew what was going on. We got into, don't tell Brad, but I think we got into like the hot tubs at like 4 a.m. and the cold tubs to like wake ourselves up. And this is a true story. I like couldn't eat, right? Like just essentially lost my job. I'm like sick to my stomach. Like I'm not eating well. I'm not sleeping. I'm like drained. And I, at a bachelor party one time, I had done one of those like IV solution things to like get some like juice in you a little bit, get some vitamins. And I called this like number and they said like, oh, we do like delivery. Like we'll come to you and give you an IV. And I was like, this is awesome. Like we got team camp going on. Like they're going to come to me, and like the price wasn't that bad. So literally this converted ambulance drives to the players' lot at the Schottenstein Center at like 8 a.m. I get in and got an IV in the back of this ambulance, and I thought it was like $50 a person or $50. They're like, oh no, it's $50, but it's a minimum of 8 people or 6 people. I paid like $300 to get an IV in the Schottenstein Center parking lot, not having a job before team camp. Swear to God, true story. One of the absolute dumbest and weirdest things I've ever done.
That is
Ask Rob if you don't believe me.
hilarious. No, I believe it. That's hilarious. That might be the craziest story you've told me. And I've heard a lot of
The
crazy stories.
just to show you how the rest of that day went too. So this is day 2 of team camp. Uh, Running on, like I said, like very little sleep. We had a team show up to team camp that actually somehow didn't register. Like they mailed in a check. Like they somehow from the camp's office got like a, yep, you're good. And then nobody told me. And I essentially ran the camp and had the schedule. And I'll never forget this. Coach comes in. Imagine this. He drove his whole team up from Cincinnati. Like they get there, and then like the schedule for team camp. And if anyone listening to this ever has to make a schedule for team camp, I want you to know you have my ultimate sincere thoughts, because it is a pain in the butt to do. You have coaches that are demanding. You have like special teams that have recruits on them that you try to cater to. You have out of state teams. You have your own coaches that send you all these requests. It's so hard. So like getting this team into team camp is not going to happen. Like the schedule was set. It was too much. And we basically had to tell this team like, no. And this guy, this coach was so pissed off. And I could tell he just wanted to like, he wanted to vent and fume at me. And I never forget, I wish I could recall the speech or the monologue I had to this guy, but it's something along the lines of like, Coach, I know you're angry. You can yell at me, but like I got fired on Monday. Like I'm fighting for my job. I really don't even want to be here right now, but like they said we still had to do this. So like, man, just lay it on or something like that. And the coach like just looked at me and just like, man, I'm gonna let you go. Like you're good. And seriously, like we bought them some pizzas and they left and they were completely cool with it. I think we brought them to like a football game in the fall as like a we're sorry, but like it was the ultimate, like you say, like what's the low point in your life? Like that was probably it. Like getting berated by a team camp coach after getting fired at the camp that you had to be at after you just spent $300 on an IV in the parking lot. Like that's probably it for me.
That's just the craziest combination of things that could have happened. But one thing we wanted to ask, we think will be very beneficial for a lot of our listeners, is seeing that you started off as a manager. What general advice or specific advice would you give to current managers who are aspiring to get into a role on a staff like you did?
Yeah, I'd say like it's hard, and I'd say I talk to a lot of people, and they talk to me about like I love talking to other managers. Anyone that ever wants to reach out to me, takes me a little bit to hit them back, but I try to hit them back. But I always challenge people like you got to figure out what your niche is. Like how can you add value? Like a lot of people will say like I work really hard. Like okay, but like everybody that's trying to get in college basketball, like that's a requirement. That's not like it's not necessarily like an asset that like sets you apart, but it's like you got to figure out like what can you do to add value, because like regardless of your position you're going to have to work hard, you're going to have to be around, you're going to have to be a part of practice, you're going to have to like do things, you're going to have to do operational things, but it's like really like what's your niche. Sometimes it's video, like that was sort of mine. Sometimes it's like coding is a big thing now. Like if you can figure out how to code and how that can help your program innovate and do some things either from a recruiting standpoint or a video standpoint or analytics standpoint, or obviously no, the big thing too is like in the creative space, those that can figure out how to navigate Photoshop or Adobe Premiere to be able to do things at a smaller level than, we're really fortunate in Ohio State. We have like Joe and Ben who do a phenomenal job in our creative team, and we got Enrique and Scott that are there to help them. We got like a team of 4, but like at some places, like you don't have anybody on your creative staff. So if you're a manager looking for a GA or a role, like to be able to do that at a place that doesn't have access or the ability to hire that, like that's such a premium now. Obviously some people like having just vague understandings of, the recruiting space or being, able to say like, yeah, I worked for an AAU team or I worked for a club team and was able to, meet people on the circuit, or I have connections. I mean, it's all about, like I said, like what do you tangibly bring that if you're going to reach out to somebody that you don't know and say like, I can bring X to your program, like, because there's a lot of people that just reach out that like that just say like, I want to be involved. It's like, well, cool, but like, what can you, if I bring you in, like, what am I getting? And I think it's sometimes if you're a former player, that's kind of like easy, because like you're gonna say like, I'm a former player and I'm gonna reach out, and people say like, well, if he's a former player, he can contribute in practice, and that's like a translatable thing that you can tell. But if you're a former manager, it's kind of like you got to be able to sell yourself a little bit more to terms of like, what's that translatable value. And there's a lot of different paths you can go down, and I mean, it's not one right wrong way to do it. You just got to figure out, like I said, like, what's your strength and how does that apply to helping a program.
First of all, before I ask my question, I just want to let you know we've had now, this is our 13th or 12th guest. The stories, like, you you might be one of the best storytellers I've ever talked to. Really, I mean, that story was incredible. I know nothing about Ohio State basketball except for Dave, who's one of my best friends, who obviously works there, and I get the information from him. But I now know so much more about Ohio basketball, and that story was awesome. But
I,
no,
I,
just yeah, that was awesome.
I appreciate that. Unfortunately, a lot of the managers that I tell these stories to think that I'm absolutely just full of shit. They really do. And I have to sort of like eventually at some point in time, like, call somebody in, like, please verify X. And I challenge you. I have people to back up all these too. It's just like, but you've been around in college basketball for long enough, especially at the same place. It's like you've had to deal with some stuff. You've been around. There's some funny stories. I mean, I got some good ones too, that I keep in the reserve. I think, Dave, you probably heard most of them. Like, I'd have to go
Yeah.
deep in the archives to pull one out that you haven't heard. I guess I laid one on you tonight, though.
Um, Kyle, I want to ask, as a recruiting director, what advice would you give aspiring recruits that are trying to go D1 outside of just being really good at basketball? Whether it's when they go on visits or when they're playing in front of coaches, what are certain traits that make those recruits valuable?
I'd say like it's a lot of the details, and what I mean by that is like when you watch just an absolute ton of recruiting film, like, it's really easy to figure out like who's talented and who's not talented. And usually like you're recruiting a list of talented guys, but it's like what I find myself getting hooked on now is like some little stuff, like Dave, like, I've had you help me clip this up too. It's like it's almost like little things that you maybe do in between plays, like supporting a teammate, or like, heck, like we clip up sometimes too, like good energy on the bench is like you're cheering on like a teammate. It's detail stuff, like, like, I, like I'm charting stuff like whether or not you dove on the floor for the loose ball or you bent over to pick it up. Like, it's little stuff like that, because when you're recruiting a big list of talented dudes and you're trying to figure out like not just who's talented, but like who are dudes going to want to play with? Like, who are dudes that contribute to winning that's just outside of like scoring? Because obviously everybody, and it's the easiest threshold to go by, but like those that score the ball the best are those that are going to get ranked the highest. It's just the general rule. It is what it is. But it's like now, like, I'm trying to figure out like shot selection. Like, that's a big part too. I'm one of those people that like I hate mid range jumpers unless like you're really good at it. And like I'm judging shot selection. That's a big part of it too. So it's like I'd say what I'm getting at, it's not just like how you score, but it's like it's the efficiency with what you play with, and how that contributes to like winning basketball. And honestly too, like whether or not I think dudes are going to want to play with you. Like, we've all have watched enough basketball to see that there's some guys that are like they're hard to play with, and that's like in this new transfer portal world we live in, like dudes that are hard to play with are either going to drive guys out or they're going to get driven out. So it's sort of like you better make sure you're bringing in the right ones now, and it's not just like it's not just about scoring. I mean, the off the court stuff too that you talked about, like when you go on visits and like ask questions, like seem engaged, like there's a lot of recruits that we've had on campus before that you're just like, you're struggling to get them to talk. Like, I want to talk to you. Like, I want to figure out, like, they call it like the island test a little bit. Like, if I think I could be on an island deserted with you for a couple of days and like we enjoy being around each other, like college basketball, like I don't care if you're a manager, you're a trainer, you're whatever, like we're around each other so much. You travel with each other. Like, it is a big family and everyone has a role within a family. And like, you gotta be a contributing factor to that in some way, shape, or form in a positive way. So like getting a feel for how good of a locker room presence a guy is going to be is an important part of the visit. And honestly, we've had guys that have come on even official visits that we've kind of like shied away from immediately after the visit because of how they acted in the visit, whether they, it was the way they acted towards a sibling, their parent, a coach that came with them, because it's like, you don't want to put somebody in your family that you think is going to cause rifts, to be honest with you.
I have another question for you, and the answer to this question might have been the story you told earlier. But outside of that story, what is your favorite Ohio State memory of all time in your manager career,
Ooh,
your entire career being at Ohio State?
man, I would probably say, and I don't know that I would have said this even at the time, but just sort of looking back, I think now it's the run we made in the Big Ten tournament during the COVID year, where we were all sort of bunkered down in the hotel, and we had to play 4 games in 4 days, and we made it to the championship of the Big Ten tournament, and Kyle Young got injured, and we just like, man, we just had so many guys stepped up. Dwayne Washington played the best basketball of his career. Kyle Young, even in that tournament, like had the most insane first half against Purdue, like hitting threes. Seth Towns, as much as he battled injuries at the end of his career, like found a way to help us win games at the end there. Justice Suing, who was battling injuries, his groin was all messed up, like found a way that we were going to him late in that run over 4 days. Like I, well, my favorite memory, and this is going to sound weird, is we actually lost. We lost in overtime, I think it was, in the Big Ten championship game to Illinois, and it was like, we were rushed to the locker room because the selection Sunday show was going on, and they wanted us to like sit as a team and watch that. And I just remember like everybody was just like together in the locker room, and it's like you're excited because like you're mad that you lost, right? And you had a chance to win the title with the Big Ten tournament, but you're excited because like you played really well and you got a lot of momentum like rolling into the NCAA tournament. And I just remember just like looking around at everybody in that room, and it was just like, damn, we're good. Like we're a good team. Like regardless of what happens in the tournament, like it's just like everybody at that moment in time felt like they were in that room together, just like going through it. And there's a lot of ups and downs in college basketball. Like it's a roller coaster, it just is. And that was one of the moments as I look back, it was just like that was a special group. And that was just, it was kind of crazy because we ended up losing Oral Roberts in the first round of the NCAA tournament, and it put a big sour note on the year for a lot of people. But like that group, that team, that togetherness, and obviously with COVID, right? We're so stuck together. That was awesome. Like that was a team that I will never ever forget.
Yeah, no, I love that story. That was the year before I got here, so I didn't get to experience all that, but I heard from former managers and guys how fun that year was.
I mean, just the ridiculousness of the year of we had to go over to the Jack Nicklaus Museum every morning and get COVID tested. It's just like every day at 8 a.m. Like you're all just sitting there getting, swab shoved up your nose. You're sitting in your chair 6 feet apart to then just go be in the office right next to each other all day. It required everybody to one sacrifice, right? Because like we didn't have a shutdown that year. We all stuck together. Like you spent so much time with each other. It was truly, I'd say unique is an overused word because it means truly one of a kind, but that was a truly unique year. And it was special because everybody was just, there's such a close group, like players, manager, staff, like it really was. It was awesome. I'd say the other awesome thing is we did other memory is we did the 10-day trip of Spain. Oh my gosh, that was elite. Like credit to David Egelhoff for putting that together for us. Anybody that has a chance to go on a foreign tour, like we've done the Bahamas thing twice. I've been a part of 2 foreign tours of Bahamas where you go there, it's Atlantis, like it's a foreign tour, but it's more of just an extended vacation to the Caribbean. The Spain trip we did was unbelievable, like top notch. We did 3 cities in 10 days. Truly cool to get your players out of a normal experience in the United States and go somewhere else. The competition was good. That was a sweet time.
That sounds insane. I'm hoping one day to get to go on something like that.
Yeah, hopefully you don't end up like getting to go on that. And some people go to like Canada where they like rent a cabin for a few days. And I'm sure that's fun. Like it's better than nothing. But like I know if Dad one time did a Canadian trip and they were like stopping at like fast food places on the way up there and stayed in a cabin and took everyone's phones. And they enjoyed it, but that wasn't Spain. That wasn't quite the same.
Yeah, it was funny. I was in the gym with Will Buford, and he was telling that exact story the other day, talking about how like we didn't even have phones. We were in a cabin. You guys go to the Bahamas now.
William Buford, maybe, and I don't care if anyone else calls me out for saying this, maybe my favorite Buckeye of all time. Maybe Will Buford was my guy. Funny story about Will. Will, my entire freshman year at Ohio State, called me Remy. And I never knew why and kind of didn't ask questions because at that point in time, like we had coaches that would just give people nicknames. And so finally, after like a year, I asked Will, I said, Will, like, why do you call me Remy? And he goes, go watch a movie called Higher Learning. And I hadn't seen it before, so I went and watched it. And it's a movie that has, I think it had like Omar Epps in it and Michael Rappaport. And Remy is a character who had red hair, and I did have red hair at the time, who basically joined like a neo-Nazi group and went up to the top of a clock tower and like had a school shooting. Like he was the school shooter. And Will called me Remy for a year, and I had no idea why. And Will just did it to basically screw with me. And I'll never forget, I walked in the next day, I said, Will, what? Like, who do you think you judge me for that? You call me Remy? Like, geez, man, like, give me a little bit of a heads up. A whole year, call me Remy. Ask Will. He admit to that. I had no idea.
Oh, that is hilarious.
Will's awesome, though. Will is one of the most simple people I've ever met, and I love him for it, too. He is a fun dude to be around, and man, he was really good. Like, people forget how good William Buford was as a Buckeye. He was there for 4 years too, and was really good the entire time. He had no ascension. He was good from day one.
Yeah, he's still good. But one other thing I wanted to touch on for the viewers, but also for me personally, what strategies do you use as, I get to see you and what you do for work every day. I'd say you're one of the most innovative and creative people in college basketball, the brief people that I've seen and know. So like, what sort of strategies are you using to sort of come up with all these new crazy ideas that is like, oh crap, like that actually is really beneficial?
So I think one thing that's just hard, just from, a lot of people I've been around in the business and kind of going through it, is we are very much in a business that's like an immediate based thing. Like, I want this now, like, let's get this done. And we do things at such a rapid pace, and we do things almost like we're very repetitive in nature too, right? Like, we're doing the same types of processes, the same recruiting things, the same visits, the same way we track stuff or evaluate stuff. And I think it's really easy. There's also a lot of movement in our business too. So like a lot of people like are there for a couple of years and then they move on. I think one of the things that I have a better understanding for it now is understanding that like sometimes you can build a system to do something better versus doing what you're immediately asked for. And taking more time to do that on the front end will dramatically help you in the back end. And I'll give you a good example. So, Dave, obviously you play a big part in our code window that we break down games through sports code. That's something that like most people don't do what we do. Most people have a fairly simple code window. We have one of the most complex code windows in all of college basketball. And we only can do what we do because we've decided, like, I would rather put the effort, and Robbie contributed to this. Like, we built a culture of managers that are involved in what we do to be able to help us break down practices and games so that then in the long run, we're able to better recall like stats, analytics, player development resources. We can sell what we do to recruits, and it's innovative and it's unique. And the way we're able to find clips to build position edits and recruiting edits, and like all those things are possible because we invested in building the infrastructure in the system rather than like just checking the box of like what needed to be done. Because until like, if we did the same thing that we sort of had always done and just, like, yep, we just need games broken down, offense, defense, put a couple labels on there, like we're good, like that checks the box and no one's going to know any different. But until you figure out how to innovate and build the system, like, well, now, like, and honestly, this is a huge credit to our managers. Like, I don't cut up any games, like, but we have a culture of managers that cut up the games. So like, I don't have to put in the work to get the benefits, but I hope that we've created a culture now too, where it's like, we have such an elite group of managers that help with film. Well, now they're going to be able to get jobs out of this too. So I think it's like, you got to invest in like I said, like the system. The system isn't my system. The system is the people of Ohio State basketball and how you can empower them to do more. And I'd say the other thing too is you just like, you got to be willing to like think out of the box. Like I always say, like we all do the same stuff. Like every college football, every college basketball facility, they all like look the same. They all operate about the same. We all do the same things. And it's just like, I always thought like, man, it's crazy that like we don't like, why not be the one program that at least tries to do things a little differently? And I think it's hard sometimes. I battle it to this day, is like when you're an out of the box thinker, and you try to present things, like some people are going to hate that. Some people are going to say like, well, that's not worth it. But the reality is like every once in a while you have an idea that definitely is worth it. And it was worth being wrong the two other times that you tried to do something or you tried to implement something for the one time that you were right and it really was a difference making. I think that's really where we kind of hit our niche, honestly, in the recruiting space, Dave, that you're involved in, like breaking down all these games. Like nobody does that, but we're able to, I shouldn't say nobody. There's very few programs that do that to the degree that we do, but I think it'll pay dividends in future years because of, we're moving a lot more towards a professional model of roster management. Honestly, we're no longer just recruit high school kids and hope they stay for 4 years. This is professional sports, except no contracts.
I have one question for you about you've been in college basketball for a really long time, and over the years you've probably seen a lot of managers, coaches, players flow through, specifically Ohio State, but like other programs that you've met other coaches and players and managers through. What's one defining trait that you see in people that you can rely on them to always be on top of their job and that will be successful throughout their life?
Yeah, I love surrounding myself with not just people that are like the hardest workers, but people that kind of has some shit to them. People that can just figure it out. Like I think it's a lot of this business. Like you find me another business out there that you work in which you got to do essentially like personnel recruiting, evaluation, marketing, sales, like coaching. Like you got to do so many different things, and especially too, I think managers are a great representation of like, I don't care what level you at. Like if you're a manager, you've had to figure out some task out there with very little direction and someone just says like, get it done. And you can't just be hardworking sometimes to figure that out. You got to have some feel. You got to have some ability to finagle something and get what you need and people please and work with somebody. And hey, I know that's, against your policy, but it'd really help us out if you could do X, Y, Z. I mean, heck, like I always say, like negotiating food orders on the road was my least favorite job as a manager. And you basically have to schmooze people over to like get them to do what you want. And like, oh, I really don't want to input this whole order online. Are you sure I can't just email it to you? Like you got to be able to figure it out, and it has some feel. And I say like, I know some dudes that are super, super hardworking, but I think like you give them an abstract project or you give them some projects with some roadblocks in the way, and it's like they get stuck. And I always think the people that have been most successful are the people that see a roadblock and be like, yeah, I can get around that. I don't know how, but I'm gonna meet the right person. I'm gonna get to the trigger puller. I'm gonna do this thing that maybe is a little bit not how I should do this, but it's gonna get to where we need to go. And I'm willing to deal with the consequences and ask for forgiveness later versus ask for permission on the front end. Not that I'm encouraging breaking rules, but like sometimes that's what this is. And I always say like the managers that have left our program and gone on to great things too are those that have just like you could give them very little direction, very little detail, and just like X needs to get to Z, and I don't care how you get there, but figure it out. And those that have done it ended up being really successful in college basketball so far.
And I love it, love it. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up or speak or maybe even ask? I mean, you see me every day, but Dan, about like Oregon or the Pac-12?
Yeah, I'm always. First of all, I'm absolutely fascinated with what's going on with the Pac-12 right now. Like the fact that we're just taking USC and UCLA and throwing them into our travel schedule and being like, yeah, guys, like, I know you're used to going to the West Coast and beautiful weather, and you're going to like Arizona, and like maybe worst case, you got to go up to like Washington. Like now you get to go to like the Midwest. Like as somebody that's at Oregon, like you want this Midwest smoke? Like we see a lot of snow, a lot of gray skies. Like it's surely I gotta imagine that something's going to happen here with Oregon choosing to go to some other conference here.
Yeah. Obviously,
I
UCLA and
can feel your
USC
excitement.
leaving the Pac-12 is not. I've talked to Dave about this. Leaving the Pac-12 is not something that I'd love because, well, I mean, obviously you hit it on the head with the weather thing. That would be terrible. Which I know the Big 12 is like the projected destination for us if we do leave. Which, oh, by the way, don't get me started on the Big 12. You guys in the Big 12, in my opinion, are the two toughest college basketball conferences. So to leave the Pac-12 to go to Big 12, competition-wise, would be tougher. But not only that, but also the traveling schedule. Instead of going to Tempe and Tucson, you have to go to Stillwater and Morgantown. Like I, especially if I'm still around and it's a situation where I'm traveling on every trip, I'm not very much looking forward to that if that day comes. But in terms of where our conference is headed, I'm on a string right now. I have no idea what's going to happen. UCLA and USC leave, and who are having it. I don't know, but I'm excited.
It's going to be fascinating too. One thing that we've always heard, like, well, the Big 12, I can't really speak to their attendance as much, but like I've always heard, like Pac-12, the attendance is a little lacking. Like we've always heard, like you go to USC and there might only be like 2,000 people there. What's crazy to us, and granted we're Ohio State, so like we're hated, so we draw like a big crowd usually. Like if we're rolling into Iowa, like Iowa's packed in the place, even if they're just okay that year. Like I think that's going to be one of the shifts that those two other Pac-12 teams are going to have to deal with. Like you're going to have to deal with big crowds. Like Big Ten basketball draws great crowds. I think we've led a nation in attendance in like 45 straight years or 44 straight years. Like it's going to be a little bit, I think, of a different environment, and for them to come out and play, and like there's real like road advantages in the Big Ten. Like I credit to Rutgers. The RAC is hard to play in. The RAC, like I want none of that. Like that is a tough place to play. It didn't used to be like that, but man, like you look at like Purdue and Michigan State and Indiana when they're rolling, it's just like there's no gimmies in the Big Ten in terms of like a home court advantage. Like I almost wonder if we're gonna roll into USC and be like, man, there's like 1,000 Ohio State people here and 2,500 people for USC. Like this ain't all that bad. I'm fascinated to see what goes on, but I want to ask a little bit, like, how many managers you guys have at Oregon?
So I'm a sophomore right now. So obviously Dave's a junior. I'm a sophomore. I started last year, so I just finished up my second year. Last year we had 6, and this year we had 10. So it was like an adjustment. Last year when we had 6, it was a lot, especially as a freshman when you're kind of given the duties of I was the only freshman, I was the youngest, so I had duties to do that were not ideal, obviously, and of course as a manager you would know that. But this year we added 5 new guys. We had one of our managers who was a senior, graduated, became a GA, and so we had 5 returning managers, including myself, and then we hired 5 more. So we don't do as much, and you guys talked about a lot. We don't do as much coding. We actually have a guy who's not a GA or a manager, but he does that. He's like I don't know his exact title, but he just started last year, and he does like all of our coding during the game. But we do like a lot of like we're in practice, especially because I'm our second tallest guy, which is crazy. I'm like 6'1", 6'2". Dave says he's like the second smallest manager out of state. We don't have big managers. We have one manager at 6'4", and I'm like 6'1". So like we're always in drills. Like we're an equipment room. Like there's just so many things that doing as a manager that like people always ask me. They're like, "Oh, what do managers do?" And I'm like, "What do we not do?" Um,
It,
so I
it's
would say
honestly
with the with
fascinating.
yeah
It's
yeah
every manager staff. It's like you talk to them, like no manager staff is exactly the same. Like it's you all do the same core things, but every program has like different things you got to do. Like man, like I was some people talk about like man, we had to do laundry as managers. I'm like, thank God, like we never had to do laundry. Like some managers out there have to do all their laundry. Like that would stink.
I
Like
actually
man,
have to do laundry tonight. So that's funny that you say
that's
that.
man, like thank goodness for E and Timmy and the help that they got there in our equipment room because we don't have to touch that. We just throw it down the chute and hopefully it comes back. Like that's the worst we have to deal with. But no, it's fascinating. Like I said, like everyone does different things at different places. Do they allow you guys to get involved in the film room at all?
A little bit. It depends. It's mainly like if you're older or you've been around. I've been like in the film room a couple of times, like in coach's office, like our some of our assistants' offices, like breaking down film and all that. Because usually, like how kind of how it goes with our program is we have players we're like closer with. Like obviously, that's how every program is. You're like you got a couple guys that you're really close with. So sometimes like coaches know that, so they'll have you go into film sessions um the with that player to kind of have like a second opinion on what they're watching and everything. So that's kind of the what we do over here, but overall it's not as highly like inclusive, I would say, as
Yeah.
Ohio State in terms of like the film part.
It's interesting. I've talked to a lot of people who are like, oh, yeah, like only juniors or seniors get involved in film. And I think that's the one thing that surprises me because, like, our attitude a little bit is like, like, and we have a big manager staff. Like, what are 15, Dave, I think? And,
Yeah.
like, at the end of the day, like, our attitude is like, not everybody is going to want to get in coaching. Like, we have managers that are just like, this is going to be an awesome experience. Like, I'm just gonna ride the wave. Like I'm gonna be helpful. I'm gonna figure it out. But like, I'm not really trying to be a basketball coach, so I don't really want to get involved in like film. And we have freshmen that come in like, no, like this is what I want to do. Like, I think we do a good job of like, everyone's got to be a manager first, right? Like you got to figure out, you got to know how to do everything. But like, if you want to get involved and want to stay extra and you want to learn how to do stuff, like I would never turn away like freshmen, sophomores that want to come in, like great, come in. And I think one of the benefits too, I talked about earlier, like building the system is like we have managers that teach other managers about film. And I think that's really like you talk about like a proud dad moment. If I'm like able to say like, we've Rob and I have been able to work together and, through a variety of strengths, like build the operation that we have from like a manager perspective. Like it runs itself. Like that's one of my favorite parts. It's like I always say, like freshmen are great times to get involved in the film room because then by the time they're juniors and seniors, like they don't need me. Like they know exactly what to do. Dave, you don't need me to code games anymore. Like you know how to do pretty much everything, at least from like the basic operation stuff. And that's where it's like, man, it gets a lot easier when you don't have to train somebody to do anything. And we had a manager, Luke Tronson, who gosh, like that dude knew every bit of sports code inside and out, and basically he got a GA job at Austin P last year with like no relationship or anything, but just because like he was one had to be the most qualified video GA in the country. Like I don't doubt that for a second. Like you can get a job if you're really good at video stuff because some places out there like Austin P didn't have video coordinators. So guess what? We can get a full service video coordinator that we don't have to train because he came from Ohio State and he knew how to do it already. Like that's one of the best things you can do to I'd say like at least get a leg up if you not just vaguely familiar with it, but he knew it all. Like he was training our managers last year in film stuff.
Yeah, no, Luke was goated. He taught me like basically everything I knew about code. When you were saying the managers teaching managers, it hit home.
Yeah, it's well. I'd say the other thing too is I don't know if you know this. We had he works for Huddle now, which is the parent company of Sports Code. One time we brought in Oliver O'Connell. Anybody that wants to learn something about sports code, he's got a ton of YouTube uh, tutorials. But he's from New Zealand, so people don't know this, but like United States film analysis is way behind overseas. Like the best like film analysis stuff that there is like English Premier League and like rugby. Like and hockey's pretty good too, but like English Premier League and like rugby, they have huge operations, multi angles, all this film analysis. Like if you're essentially like a video coordinator or a video analyst, you make like big time dollars overseas doing that for EPL teams and rugby teams, and they're doing crazy outputs and multi all this stuff. So we actually brought over Oliver O'Connell, who's from New Zealand, who had a rugby background, and he was a GA for us for a year, and he was better at sports code than I was. Like he taught me stuff, and so like that's one of the things too. You talk about like he helped build our system too, because he was a guy that was like basically a GA that was like a video specialist, and he's one of the smartest people I've ever met when it came to that kind of stuff. So much so that Huddle hired him. So that's kind of proof in the pudding there that he, another Ohio State sort of GA manager type that like gone to bigger and better things because he got super involved in video. And he was, like I said, he was a lead at it. People go to his tutorials and training still to this day.
That's awesome. And I'm excited to do more gritty manager stuff when we're down in Florida figuring out where we can secure a court for this Oregon Ohio State manager game, because it's going down.
Yeah, how's well? First of all, here's the other thing too: is like how's the Oregon manager staff's take job in ballrooms? Do you guys do logos? Are you just like a key and we're done? You get the 3-point line. Like manager staff went pretty strong this year with taping down some logos in ballrooms.
Yeah, I've talked to Dave about this, but you guys travel a lot more managers than we do. We only travel 2 and 1 GA. So in terms of the
Dang.
work that we're going to be putting in on the court, might have to do some 3v3 because I don't know who we're going to be traveling. Might have to have our strength and conditioning coach play. We can't have our trainer play. He's like 65 years old, so he can't play. But we'll maybe a walk on. We'll play. We'll figure it out. But in term, yeah, I would be really excited if we got a game going. That would be really fun, especially to get to match up with Dave, who has pretty much been my childhood best friend since high school.
You don't want that. There's no friends on the court. You're not wearing scarlet and gray.
We couldn't function if we traveled 2 managers. Like maybe we're high maintenance to a degree. I mean that in a respectful way, but like we could not travel with 2 managers. We would lose our mind. Our players would lose our minds. Our staff would lose their minds. Everybody would lose their minds. People would forget stuff. Yeah, I will say this too. It's something crazy just to talk about the change of from 10 years ago when I was a manager to now. We traveled with like 4 bags. That was it. It was like 4 bags. We travel now with like 3 minivans full of stuff. Like it's like 16 bags and shoe bags and nutrition trunks and speakers. It absolutely just blows me away. And the pack job that our managers have to do underneath buses is flat out impressive. How we're going to get all that stuff on there. Do you remember this year, Dave? I don't know, were you on the trip where the flight crew tried to pack the bus?
Yeah.
And they're like, "Oh, not all the stuff's going to fit." And we're like, "Get out of here." We ripped everything out and repacked it. Like
I think that was I think it was when we landed in Iowa. I think it was.
No, I think you're right. Yeah, because it was a trip that we packed heavier because we did the 2-for-1 trip, right? Yeah, we didn't come back. It was that trip. That was an impressive. Those guys looked at us like these idiots. They have no idea. Like this ain't getting on the bus. Like this is getting on that bus. Like we're gonna do this. The only person I've ever seen more talented at packing stuff in my entire life than collective groups of managers is if you go to the Atlantis Resort, okay, and you have a ridiculous amount of bags, and I have this picture somewhere that I have to find. They threw almost all of our team bags on one trolley cart, and they had bags that were like leveraging the weight of other bags. So like bags were hanging off. We had like 30 bags on one trolley cart. This is a true story, swear. We talked to Weston Strayer. former manager of Ohio State, former GA. This is a true story. The guy that did the most unbelievable pack job I've ever seen in my life is in the hotel with us, taking the bags to our room, shit talking us that he's going to drop 30 on us the next day because we had no idea this. But the team we were playing, the Bahamas All Stars, is really just the best basketball players at the Atlantis Resort. And lo and behold, that dude actually did drop 30 on Kentucky like 2 days prior. And we played against that guy like 2 days later. True story. I thought we were playing like, like you're in the Bahamas playing the Bahamas All Stars. This has to be like legit, like semi-pro team. No, this is just Atlantis is a huge place. This is just the best basketball players on the resort have a team together, and they just pass out jerseys before the game. That's exactly what it was.
That's insane.
That's crazy.
How about this though? This the other thing about that. We showed up to the game and we hear like there's this other dude and they got a young kid that's playing with this group and he's really really good and we're like, oh, like he dropped like 20 on North Carolina and 30 on somebody else, and we show up and they're like, he's not going to play today, load management, he's just played like 5 days in a row. It was DeAndre Ayton. That was the guy that we were supposed to play, and he was sitting in the stands watching just because nothing else to do and normally play with that team. Yeah, DeAndre Ayton was just a kid in the Bahamas just playing against all these 4-4 teams that came over. So he played against Kentucky and all these other teams. So that was kind of a cool deal. You're like, God, he's huge. Like, he looks a little different. I think at one point in time, someone's like, should we recruit him? And like, nah, he's going to be a lot of money.
Yeah.
Pre NIL money.
Yeah. Changed everything now.
It is.
I have
it's going to change even more.
I was going to say I have one quick story about how you guys were talking about the bags thing. This year we had the Arizona and Arizona State trip. And the night we came back from Arizona State, we had a huge win as Arizona State. We needed it. And the team was in high spirits. We got a big time win, close game. And this year we were like really bad in close games. So we actually like got one, which was huge. But as we're going back, like we're heading back to Eugene, we're unloading the plane, or like we're getting the bags on the plane. And like the flight crew, like you said, they're like, oh, we got it. They're we travel a ton of bags too. They didn't have like the bags, they were not fitting on the plane. There weren't enough. And I remember our one of our GAs, he's played at Cal. He's 6'8", 325 pounds, like big dude. He's like in practice, guards are all our bigs. Like he goes, no, out of the way, like let me do this. And he gets me and the other man that are traveling, and us three are just stuffing the back of the plane with bags. We feel like offensive linemen, like we're pushing these bags onto the plane. And I remember, like, because it was like they had like a 5-foot lady doing it, and so she wasn't like pushing hard enough. So Corey's like, oh, get out the way, I'm gonna do this, and just starts pushing the bags onto the plane. And everybody normally gets on the plane, they like watch their stuff. They're all watching him. Everybody, our coaches, our players are all watching Corey as he's pushing these bags, because normally like everybody's in the plane and they're ready. But that story this year was so funny, and it just made me remind me of that when you said that story about the flight crew. But no, that story, that's one of my favorite stories from this year for us. That was awesome.
Bag packing, man, vital manager skill, and unfortunately, it only gets worse as you go up levels. Because like I said, we don't need 90% of the things I'm sure we travel with. They don't get used, but like they're there.
My favorite.
Do you guys have a shoe bag?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
We travel bag, with two separate ones.
Like primary pair and backup pair.
So we're the only team in the country that does this. We all wear the same color shoes. And I thought that was not true. I'm like, there's no way that's true. But I looked, we're the only team in the country that wears the same color shoe. So we travel, if we have a road trip of two, we travel two separate shoes. Mm-hmm. So green with yellow and all that. So
I never thought, is that like a rule? Like, is that like a Big Phil rule, or is that like a coaching staff rule?
It's more of our equipment guy. He's done it ever since he got there, and it's kind of just stuck, which is bad for us because that's an extra bag we have to carry. But yeah, at this point, we have so many bags already. It's like, what's another one gonna hurt? So
I think it's funny. Like we never used to have a shoe bag, and if you remember this year, what was it? Was it in the Final Four that there was I think it was Nigel Pack blew his shoe out and they had to send the manager back to the locker room and like he got like the wrong pair of shoes. It's like so funny to be like a shoe bag is actually a good idea to have because like if something happens, you got your backup pair of shoes, everything's labeled, you know exactly where to go. Like you don't got to go fumbling through somebody's bag. Like I immediately like text my friend that was at Miami like got to get a shoe bag. I don't know why you didn't have a shoe bag. Put your manager in a bad spot there. Twice they had to zoom in on that manager running back to the locker room, and I bet you that guy was like, "Shit, I wish we had a shoe bag." I felt so bad for him. You know what I'm talking about? I think it was in the Final Four matchup. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that poor guy. Made it look like he brought the wrong shoes back. Like maybe Nigel Pack didn't have a second pair of shoes. Maybe that was literally like he's just back there in the locker room. Like I hope these work, and ran back. You never know, but I felt bad.
I feel like we need to find that guy, get an interview, get the story.
I would love to know the actual scoop on what happened with the shoe incident because I'm 99% sure that manager got thrown under the bus. Like there was nothing he could have done differently in that situation. The only thing he should have done is probably come back to the bench with two pairs. But like, man, that's a long run too. Like we do some runs through like tunnel to bench, but like that's a football stadium. So like where your locker room was, like that was probably like I'm not going to say a quarter mile away, but that was a hike. And that dude had to do that like 4 times in a game. Like miserable. Like, thank God that wasn't like a heavier set manager that they had to like send back there, and conditioning would have played in. That could have gotten really rough. That would have been a bad TV moment for everybody involved. So they picked the guy that looked like he ran cross country in high school. So I think it worked out okay for him.
You said conditioning could have played a factor. That's hilarious. But yeah, if no one else has anything, I think
Can we just do this every week? I could just tell random stories. I think I'd like this.
I would love.
Normally, I feel like I have to pay people to listen to me.
You got to start your own tea time with KD.
No, I'd get fired. I 100% would get fired. I would absolutely say something or tell some story that I really shouldn't say and get fired.
We'll save it for the 1 a.m. in a hotel ballroom somewhere.
I have one final question before I let you guys go. You asked me what my favorite memory was at Ohio State. I want to ask you, what's your worst memory at the programs that you're guys with? Give me your worst memory. I'll tell you mine, but you guys got to go first.
You kick it off, Dan.
Worst memory. I'm not going to go like a loss we had, because that's I mean, losses suck, and that's kind of bad. Actually, I can't think of one, Dave. Can you go? Because I got to think of one.
Yeah. There's got to be some moment out there where you're like, I can't believe I just got asked to do this. This is a new low. Like, what's your low moment?
Yeah.
Dave, you got anything?
Yeah, I'll say I won't name who the player was, but it was a combination of two things that had happened. He was doing a drill, and the shots were just simply not falling, and it took abnormally long, and it was also at 5 a.m., so that played a factor into it, and we ended up being there from 5 a.m. to like 7:15. I'm sprinting for every rebound, but then we go downstairs, and upstairs, because we were using the women's gym, I forget what was going on in our gym, and upstairs he had left because he like took off his like shirt at one point. I think he changed shorts, and it was just his sweaty clothes upstairs, and then had to go pick those up, drenched, bring them back down. It was like 7:15 in the morning. So I'd say probably that one. Either that or not necessarily. It was actually a really fun memory, but the Michigan State trip this year, when we were loading the bus in a blizzard, it was actually kind of fun, but at the same time, you're
ridiculous. We had a snowball fight, didn't we?
Yeah. So it was fun, but it was also in the back of your head. You're like, what am I doing right now?
Everybody has some sort of moment if you're in college basketball, regardless of position. Like you're just like, what am I doing with life? Like this is ridiculous. I should not be doing this. This is not even fun, but it's kind of fun because we're all going through this together. Like everyone has those moments. I'll tell you mine while you're still thinking. So I told you earlier, like getting fired, I had like that just ridiculous week. Like that was a low for me, but that was a culmination of a lot of things. My single worst, like Not fucking doing that. Nope, not doing it. I'll quit moment was we had a recruit on campus for an official visit. And I'm not going to say the recruit, but his mom worked at like a bank or was some sort of like customer service, like front counter worker, and at some business that got robbed. And she was kind of going through a little bit of like PTSD, like with it. And one of the things that she had and she brought on the visit is she had like a security dog. And this dog, I don't even know if it was actually a dog because it was the scariest looking four-legged creature I've ever seen. I guess it was kind of like a dog, but like it had a face that like kind of looked like a Dementor and a dog. It was awful. So this dog, all right, was like on the visit. And the kid was going to they were going to the football game, like going to the Ohio State football game. Huge deal, ton of people, like probably not exactly the good scenario that you'd like to put somebody that's going through PTSD through, but like, so she's like, well, can the dog go to the game? Like, no, this beast cannot come into the football game with us. It cannot go down on the field. This thing is going to kill somebody if it looks at it the wrong way. And it should. I mean, that's what it's there for. So we decided that the only thing we could do is we're going to shut the dog into our practice gym closet. We just left the dog there with like water, and I think they had some like food, but like put the dog in this closet, which one is hilarious because if somebody didn't actually know that there was a dog in there and open that up, like this dog probably would have eaten them. But two, so this is the lowest moment is they go and they get the dog after the game. They open the door, dog's really excited to see her, and immediately the smell just comes bursting out of the closet. It is putrid. It's awful. Like it made you want to vomit. And I peek in there and there's just dog shit everywhere. Like this dog clearly had run around in it, and it was like, I mean, honestly, the dog had like diarrhea everywhere too, because like we locked this dog in this closet and left it for like 4 hours. Like I can't imagine this dog was thrilled, and there's just dog shit all over our closet. And I remember the assistant coaches, I think it was Jeff Bowles and Dave Dixon, looked at me and go, Dave D put his hand on my shoulder, and goes, you're gonna need to clean that up. Like, fuck no. Like I'm not. I draw the line. Like I'll do a lot of stuff in recruiting. Like I was a GA at the time. Like I'll do what I'm not. I don't know that I'm cleaning up this dog shit. Like I don't get paid enough. I don't get paid at all. Like I pay for parking to be here every day. Like I'm not cleaning up this dog shit. And I grudgingly cleaned up dog shit out of our closet for probably like 90 minutes because it was absolutely everywhere. And it's not like the other bad thing too is like not like we had like plentiful like gloves and cleaning supplies everywhere. Like it was a miserable process that I was like, nope, I'm not doing this. I'm quitting. And we got through it, but yeah, that was a little rough cleaning dog shit out of the gym.
Wow. I don't know if my memory's that bad, but I did think of one. It was last summer, and it was actually our team camp. So the first team camp that I've done with Oregon. And so how we do it is it was individual camp. So we do 3 days of team camp, 4 days of individual camp. So this was day 4. This was the final day, and we split it up. We split it up K through 5 as one group, 6th and 7th grade is one group, 8th grade is one group, 9th grade or high school is one group. So 8th grade is its own group. So I was coaching a team like all throughout the week. And like at each spot, each group, they have a commissioner, which is like the person that's in charge of the group. And it happened to be Corey, who I was talking about earlier in the story, but he had a family emergency. So Scott, who was running the camp, he's our Dobo, asked me to be in charge of the 8th grade group for the day. And I'm 18 years old. Like these 13, 14-year-old kids are not going to want to listen to me. So I'm like, okay, whatever. That was not what was bad, though. What was bad was the situation that happened. So we played games, right? The kids play games or whatever. And I'm coaching while being in charge of all the other games. So I'm trying to coach my team, but I'm also worrying about like, you know, all the other games that are going on in making sure nothing happens. So I'm coaching my game, and I hear a loud scream, just like a high-pitched scream, and this kid sprains his ankle, right? He sprains his ankle, and I'm like, okay, whatever, it's fine. Here's what's bad. Our athletic trainer was on his 2-week vacation in Michigan. So we don't have a trainer there. And like he sprains his ankle like bad. Like he needs a doctor, a trainer, somebody. And so I'm like, okay. And I'm in charge here, and I'm like, okay. So I tell the group, and there's like some of our players are like in or coaching as well in this group. So I'm like, I have to go take this kid to the athletic training office. Like, you guys continue on. So they're continuing on. I take him downstairs to the training office. He's like limping on my shoulder. And I look at his ankle, and his ankle is just a lump, like just swollen. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm an 18-year-old manager trying to become an athletic trainer by this trying to cure this kid's ankle. And I'm not even supposed to be in charge for the day, and I am. And I'm supposed to be coaching my team upstairs, and I'm not. And I remember just like putting ice on his ankle, and he's like, "Do you know how to do this?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know how to do this. I do. Does it look like I've ever done this?" And he was like, "I have really bad ankles." And I was like, "Well, that's great to know right now. That's great to know." So that moment was truly, it was just a frustrating. The week had been long. It was our 7th day in a row of camp. Just, and it was just so frustrating because the kid's like asking me all these questions while I'm trying to help his ankle, and then I'm supposed to be in charge upstairs, but nobody's there. So it's not really like a basketball like team moment, but it was just more a team camp, and
Hey,
I
that's
just
part of
remember
it.
that day.
No, just
Exactly.
a
That
lot of,
moment right there
yeah.
is the truly defined moment of a manager. For sure.
Yeah, and it's exactly what you said. That you're thrust into some moment where you're like, I am just absolutely not qualified to do this at all, and
Yeah.
I have to. Yeah, but I feel for you. There's a lot of positions like that. Camps are hard. I had to. I run our camps, and we had well, there's always some bad injury that happens at camp, and like calling somebody's like parent is like one of my least favorite things because you just never know how they're going to react. And I never forget. There's this kid, and he fell on his face and put his teeth through his like lips, like literally he had like a hole because his like tooth was coming through there. I don't know how he did it, some freak thing. He like clearly needed dental surgery, and I'm like, just like telling this parent it's gonna be terrible. They're gonna like freak out. Like I don't want to, it's hard to deal with, parents that are hysterical because your kid's hurt. And I remember like I called mom first. Mom didn't answer. I called dad. Dad answers. It's like, yeah, your son. Like, I'm just letting you know. Like, we're gonna have to get a medical attention. Like, he was an injury. He fell on his face. Like, his tooth is coming through his lip. He goes, my son is so soft. He just fakes an injury every game. I'm like, sir, actually, like this is a pretty big deal. Like he actually has like a hole like in his like gum, like where his tooth went through, and he's like, well, can't you just like, like he's trying to fight for a spot in like summer, like is there any way he can like finish camp? Like can they suture it up or like put a band-aid on? I'm like, your kid is crying, like there's blood on the floor that we're cleaning up because blood's everywhere, and like this dad is like, put it back in. He'll be fine. Like he sent him to camp. Like just he's soft, soft. Like I finally had to like convince this dad. Like, hey, you gotta come be here. And this guy walked in because like I met him at the end of our practice hallway to like bring him over. He worked like strangely close by. He was there so fast, and he like walked up to his son. And he goes, oh, he's like, that looks freaking gnarly. Like, that's terrible. It's like, yeah, man, like I told you to come here. Like your kid is over here, like on speakerphone, listening to you call him soft as he's got a hole in his mouth. And those phone calls are never fun, but that's one of the ones that actually, like, I was fighting back laughter a little bit because it's like, this dad's just going in on his son. But yeah, it's camp. Camp is one of my least favorite responsibilities of all time. It always will be. And again, I'm going to throw out my special shout out to anybody that ever has to put together a team camp schedule. It is, leave me alone for a day, lock me and Robbie in a room, and like it'll come out, it'll be fine. But the way you got to get there is just a painstaking process. Because the moment you think it's good, it's like, oh no, X high school just called and they have a recruit and they definitely want their games to be at 9, 11, and 2. And you're like, well, let me just throw out absolutely everything I've done and restart. So it sucks, it really does. But hey, I know I probably have taken over an hour of your guys' time, and you had to listen to way too many of my stories. So you probably deserve a break from that. I appreciate you
No,
guys
no,
having me on.
It's always
was
a
awesome.
pleasure. We
Awesome.
appreciate you coming on, and just want to give a shout out to our Buckeye Redbirds, Brandon Lieb and now Jordan Davis. They're building like the Big
I
Ten
know.
2.0 over there. Pito's doing something special.
Oh yeah, good couple days there for the Redbirds. I thought Tyler Hicks tweeting out that he's gonna eat like cheese curds tonight. That's like his celebration tweet. I don't really know what that's about, but I gotta hit him up on that. Hicks with the Redbirds. Obviously, they're like Buckeye Nation 2.0 over there. They got 4 Buckeyes on staff.
Yeah, they got
Ridiculous.
Mike Betts, Hicks, Pito,
Oh, they
Dockage.
got dockets too. They got 5.
Yeah,
They got 5
yeah,
Buckeyes on staff.
like their whole staff.
Buckeye converts. It's fun, man. One of my favorite parts of this business is being able to cheer and root for the people that you know that have gone on to other places. It's what, even if you're not in the tournament, it's like what makes it fun to me. Like you're rooting for the people that you know and rooting for them to have their one moment. It's like my my favorite thing ever. I mentioned Bryce Crawford earlier. Bryce Crawford was at UMBC when they beat Virginia as the first 16 to beat a 1, and like that, I think that those people that are in this business long enough and connect with other managers and staff members that all sprout and go different places. Like it's so cool to be able to watch people achieve moments like that. And that's it's part of what you live for. It's part of what makes this business fun. And obviously it's fun to watch too.
Yeah, definitely gonna be rooting for Oregon bunch next year. Besides late November
Besides
down in
one
Florida.
weekend.
Yeah.
That same
they
goes here.
lose by 70.
But well, now I'm kind of integrated in the Ohio State. I know Kyle now. Obviously, Dave. I know Colby, and I did Hicks. He was our first guest on here, so it's kind of funny that you mentioned him. He's the first ever PPP guest, so he can always have that on his resume wherever he goes in his life. He's the first PPP guest.
Hicks, one of the smartest individuals I've ever met in my life. He's no shortage of ideas and brain power with that guy.
100%. But
who's going to be the first repeat guest? I think that's the real question. Have you had a repeat guest yet?
We have not. This is number 15. It's funny though. We had a meeting last week and we were talking about a repeat guest in the future, but nothing established yet. So could be the first. Could be you.
Hey, you talk to my agent. Okay, it's going to take some serious NIL dollars for the second appearance. The first one's always free.
We can offer you a Oregon basketball T-shirt, a manager loop, and some goldfish from the lounge.
You cut up a couple of recruit games, and I'm sold.
Yeah, I'll have my people reach out. But no, this is phenomenal. Appreciate it as always, Katie.
Appreciate you guys having me on. It was a blast. Love to be on again if you guys ever want me. If you can tolerate some more story time.
Yes, sir. Dan, you wanna say the outro?
All right, guys. Thank you, Kyle, again for coming on, and PPP out.